Hi, second grade. It's Miss Balmer here. I'm going to help you with your food chain activity today. Now, you have already watched a video all about food chains. Do you remember what a food chain is? If you said anything like a model showing us how energy gets transferred, that means moved, between plants and animals, then you are correct. I have already drawn a food chain today, but before I show it to you, I want to review so that you know what is supposed to go on your food chain. Do you remember from the video what your food chain must have? If you said the sun, then you would be correct. Now, the sun gives its energy to a special part of the food chain, which is able to make its own food. What have you learned about that uses the sun to make its own food? If you said a plant, then you would be correct. The scientific word we're going to use for plant today is a producer because it can produce its own food. Now, what would come next in the food chain? If you said an animal, like this beautiful rabbit, then you would be correct. The scientific word we're using for animal today is consumer because it consumes or eats the producer. Now, some food chains that you saw in the video may have stopped here with 3 things, and that's okay. But not all food chains are this simple. So some food chains may go on and include one more consumer. So you can see Miss Balmer's food chain shows the sun through the arrow giving its energy to the grass, the producer. The rabbit eats the grass and gets its energy, and then the fox might eat that rabbit to get its energy. Now, we're going to do one together for practice. So I need you to pause the video, get yourself something to write with and something to write on. Okay, so I have my tools to write with and write on. I'm going to use 2 colors today because I like to make my energy transfer show up. But if you don't have 2 colors, that's totally fine. Now, you might have heard on the video, the woman's voice said that humans are at the top of the food chain. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means. If we had a food chain that had humans in it, think about what's something that we like to eat. I know just for dinner last night, me and Mr. Balmer had some chicken. Now, as you're making your food chain, remember, it's always important, and with all of our scientific drawings, it's important to label. So think back. What are humans on the food chain? We're not the sun, and we're not a plant. So we would be right here. We would be a consumer. Remember, consumer means eater of. So we're going to label our human as a consumer. We're going to label our chicken. Now, what do you think we label our chicken? Is it able to make its own food from the sun? If not, then it's also a consumer. Now, this one might be a little tricky for you. Do we know what chickens eat? Most chickens, if they're in the wild, they like to nibble on things like insects, maybe some worms from time to time. So we're just going to draw a little insect on our food chain. Now, in order to label our insect properly, we have to think. Does our insect consume food, or is it able to produce its own food? What do you think? You're right, it's a consumer. Now, what does an insect like to feast on? Probably something like grass, maybe some leaves of some flowers, something like that. So again, we ask ourselves, does this grass eat other things, or is it able to produce its own food? You're right, it's a producer. It produces its own food using the energy from the sun. Okay, now your job is to go create your own food chain. If you need some help coming up with an idea for a food chain, go back and watch the video. Fast forward to towards the end. In about the last 2 minutes of the video, it just gives lots of different examples. If you still need help, think about it in terms of habitats. Think about a river. What lives in a river and how does it eat? Or think about a forest. What lives in a forest and how does it eat? Think about the ocean, so on and so forth. Good luck. Get creative.